Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let's hop across the pond for Prime Minister's questions. Jeremy Corbyn, Theresa May. I am biased in this. I like Jeremy Corbyn. An immense fan of Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah, an immense fan of Jeremy Corbyn. I just said it that way. Now, there's a specific way that Jeremy Corbyn argues that I love. And it's something that you don't necessarily hear in the United States because, for the most part, our candidates are bought. And if they bring up these issues of class, well, that's problematic. In your case, however, Jeremy Corbyn is a socialist. Jeremy Corbyn looks at the world, to some respect, through these issues and through this lens of class. When he's arguing at the dispatch box, what usually takes center stage, at least in this very specific one, but I've seen many in the past where he would ask similar questions, are these issues of class. And there is a moral force that's behind him that I would imagine bugs the hell out of Theresa May. This Prime Minister questions, I think you're going to see Theresa May annoyed like nobody's business. It's not that what he's saying is epic. It's simplistic. But it's simplistic in a way that gets to the heart of the matter with regards to what matters more. What is the priorities of one party over the next? Meaning, what are the priorities of Labour, ultimately, and what are the priorities of the Conservative government? And not just Labour, what are the priorities of Labour under Corbyn? I'd argue that this, and I'm pretty sure if you guys are across the pond, you guys have seen his manifesto. But just even in his cadence and how he goes across, how he gets across his point. And in this particular case, in this one, he's done an awesome job. I think he does an awesome job because I'm a lefty, and I love this moral argument, this moral force argument when you're asking these questions. And by the way, Jeremy Corbyn is not the only one who's made this argument. Sometimes I've seen people make this argument against conservatives from the standpoint that the guy's not even a lefty. What is it, Question Time? I think it's called Question Time. I can't think of the British cat's name, but the interviewer was awesome. He was talking to David Cameron, and in the United States, oftentimes when they're having interviews, our pressers, the press over there is a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more, let's say aggressive. Aggressive is an understatement. But he sits back and he looks at him, arms folded, looking under his eyeglasses at David Cameron. And as he's looking under at David Cameron is the Prime Minister, but he is essentially bringing David Cameron up for cross-examination. And he asked the most simplistic question in the world that David Cameron couldn't answer. And David Cameron tried to spin and shake and move and jump and light himself on fire. And ultimately, the interviewer just asked the same question over again and over again until David Cameron answered the question. How many food banks were in service before you took office? And how many food banks are there now? Look at the way Jeremy Corbyn dismantles Theresa May. This is awesome. And I'm going to interject into it because I think there's something very specific that he's getting at that's, at least for Americans, is unfamiliar. So let's take a look.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week does indeed mark 6 months since the avoidable and tragic fire at Grenfell Tower, which took the lives of 71 people and injured and traumatised many more, and I too will be at the service tomorrow in memory of them. But that fire also shone a light on the neglect of working class communities all over this country. And since this government came to power, homelessness is up by 50%. Rough sleeping has doubled. Homelessness and rough sleeping have risen every single year since 2010. Will the Prime Minister pledge today that 2018 will be the year when homelessness starts to go down?
Across this House, we don't want to see anybody who is homeless or anybody who is sleeping rough on our streets. That is why the government is putting £500 million into the question of homelessness. It's why we backed the bill that was brought forward by my honourable friend, the member for for Harrow, and it's why we have ensured that we are putting into place a number of projects that will deal with this issue of rough sleeping. But I have to say to the right honourable gentleman that when we look at the question of housing, we need to look at ensuring that there are more homes available to people, that we are giving people support to get into those homes. That's why in the budget, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, set out a whole range of ways in which we will be helping people to ensure that they have their own roof over their heads, compared to Labour, where house building went down by 45%. Where the number of homes bought and sold went down by 40%, and social housing went down by 400,000.
Jeremy.
Just to interject for the moment, she didn't answer that question. She didn't answer the question. Are you going to make a commitment to make sure that these numbers go down? Are you going to make a commitment? You're the government in power. You're the people in power. You have the authority. Are you going to make a commitment to make sure that essentially sleeping rough, I love that. God, I love British slang. Sleeping rough decreases. The answer to that question was either yes or no. Telling me how much you guys are putting in your budget. Look, and that's another thing about this. We're going to put XYZ in the budget. It's not about how much you put in your budget. It's whether it's enough to compensate for the thing that you're trying to deal with. It's like, I give an example. It's like saying the United States is X number of millions of people without health care. Okay, we're going to put on Obamacare. Well, yeah, and you still have 20, 30 million people that doesn't have coverage, and these numbers are blowing through the roof in regards to the healthcare costs. It's not about how much you put into it. It's about whether or not what you put into it is sufficient for whatever you're trying to take advantage of or whatever you're trying to accomplish. If he's asking you, are you going to cut down on the poverty in regards to people sleeping rough? The answer is either yes or no. And depending upon whether the answer is yes or no, it to some degree tells your priorities. Ultimately, you will have money to put into the budget for other things. What do you choose to prioritize? That's what it boils down to. But let's keep going.
Corbyn. Mr. Speaker, the last Labour government cut homelessness by 2/3 during its time in office. When Labour left office, the number of children in temporary accommodation was a lot less than it is now. Yep. I asked the Prime Minister for a pledge to reduce the amount of homelessness next year. The pledge was not forthcoming. Yeah. 128,000 children will spend Christmas without a home to call their own, 60% up on 2010. It's too late for this Christmas. But will the Prime Minister promise that by Christmas 2018, fewer children will be without a home to call their own?
Say to the right honourable gentleman again that we of course want every child to wake up in their own home, particularly at Christmas. But it is...
By the way, one more point. There's a dueling set of ideologies here, and more pure than you'd get in the United States. In the United States, these people are bought for the most part. You can't necessarily believe any particular position that they're taking as being earnest. You have this kind of oligarchical system that's this kind of parasitical thing that's on the government itself. You can't even call it a democracy or a representative government at this point. It represents a small faction. But this is slightly different. Jeremy Corbyn is a socialist. He's a devout socialist. He knows what he is. He holds his shape. If you ask him what he believes in, he would tell you exactly what he believes in without any hedge. He understands who he represents. Theresa May, she's not a socialist by any degree. And yeah, she also knows who she represents. The arguments that they're making, Jeremy Corbyn takes society as being something that we ourselves create. This is not made by God. This is us. We ourselves make certain decisions that allow our society to kind of flow out the way our society flows out. That includes laws and regulations and policy with regards to monetary policy. How do the cash flow in your society? And where are the resources going to in that sense? Britain is a very rich country. Where are the resources? How are the resources being distributed? Now, Theresa May's acts as if this is some kind of act of God. Like she has no power whatsoever to deal with these issues. Jeremy Corbyn is making very specific points of, look, we make choices in government. We decide what we want to fund. We decide how we want to fund our government. We decide how the policies with regards to taxation and everything else. What are the services we're going to hold as our governmental services themselves? And you should see his manifesto. His manifesto is amazing. It's amazing. There's no hedge. But in Theresa May's case, her argument is, yeah, we would all want people to not sleep rough. And we would all want kids to, you know, have a decent meal. But this is the difference. One side also wants that, but one side is willing to implement policy to make sure that takes place. The other side thinks that this is some kind of just act of God, that people are just hungry or people are just sleeping rough. And no, it's not an act of God. Your society makes certain choices. Your society makes certain decisions. Who is the least among you? What does your society value? And this is essentially this line of argument. The line of argument that he's making is very specific to who do you believe in has importance. What's more important to you? Well, let's take a look. Theresa May doesn't want people sleeping rough. That is nice of her. Let's keep going.
It's incredibly important. People know they can keep a roof over their heads, even in the most desperate circumstances. That's why we're making sure that councils can place families in a broader range of homes if they fall into these circumstances. So since 2011, councils have been able to place families into private rented accommodation so they can get a suitable place sooner. We've changed the law in relation to so that families with children shouldn't find themselves in B&B accommodation except in an emergency. And through implementing the Homelessness Reduction Act, we're making sure our families at risk can get support before they find themselves homeless. And I say to the honourable gentleman, I have been very clear, as I was a few weeks ago, that this government is going to be a government that puts a clear focus on housing, on building the homes that people need, on ensuring that people are given help to get into those homes, and also on acting to prevent homelessness before it happens. That's what we're doing. That's what will make a real difference to people's lives.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Here's the thing, man. I mean, if you're going to say that, why not just say yes? Like, from a political standpoint, he's... Let me just say it this way. It looks immensely bad when one party gets up. The guy's a socialist. He's a true believer. So he's not saying it just to be saying it. And he's making this point about, look, homelessness is on the rise. People are sleeping rough. Will you make a pledge to me that we can get homelessness down, that we can keep people, human beings, from laying on the streets? If you don't say anything other than, I mean, your only answer should be yes, and you sit back down. I guarantee you that would have given more impact than the answer that you gave. You should have said yes, I make a pledge for it. I'm just saying, whether you believe it or not, whether you think it's a good idea or not, it looks immensely bad to be on Prime Minister Questions. I don't know how much of the British population watches PMQ, but if they ask you, are you going to do something about homelessness? We have people sleeping on the street, human beings. This absolute invisible violence of a society allowing such a thing to take place. If you're giving a word salad, oh man, it looks bad. It looks bad. The only answer to that question is yes, I make the pledge. When he asks the same question, he's hitting you with moral questions or moral quandaries. Where do you stand? Whose side? People or profits? People or profits? And it is... I'm just saying, it looks bad to be asked questions like this and to not just being able to give a firm, yes, we are going to do X. I understand you're going through a litany of things, but when you're given a list like that, it makes it sound like you're trying to slide or hide between the words. It's like a Hillary Clinton answer. You be resolute and know who you are. I mean, granted, the word salad may be the only thing that you could do, and the word salad might have been the best thing, because I suspect that the answer was going to be either way. No, we're not going to make a pledge for homelessness, and we're not going to make a pledge for dealing with child poverty or building homes. All right, let's keep going.
Mr. Speaker, the sad reality is that 1 in 100 children in this country are homeless at any one time. It is a national disgrace, and it is getting worse. And for all she says about the private rented sector, can I just quote from a letter I received from Rachel this week? She says, I have a knot in my stomach every New Year period when we're due to sign a new tenancy agreement. after renting the same flat for 10 years, never being in arrears, and keeping the property in good order, we were given notice to quit out of the blue. Will the Prime Minister help people like Rachel and back secure 3-year tenancies for all private renters?
Say to the right honourable gentleman that I think he was present in the chamber when the budget was given to this chamber, and that's precisely why we said that we are looking at ways in which we can encourage longer-term tenancies. Now, the point is, what is important is ensuring that people have the ability to have the accommodation that they need, that they want, and on the basis that is right for them. That's why, as I say, we are dealing with this issue of longer-term tenancies. But he talks about people renting their homes, and his response on renting is to bring in rent controls. Yeah. Now, rent controls have never worked. They result in reducing the number of homes that are available for people who want to be able to have accommodation and a roof over their own head. And it's not just me that says that Labour Party policy won't help people who are renting. Shelter say that it won't help people who are renting.
Again, this is going to be one more thing that Americans are going to be mind blown by. The letter that he's reading is a letter from somebody who sent him essentially an issue, a problem, or something to that effect. When Jeremy Corbyn first came into Parliament, he would read these letters all the time, and they would joke him, they would deride him for it, and he would continuously read those letters. I've made this point before that in the United States, the left was supposed to be the Democratic Party. At some point, the left became just this kind of corrupt Republican light that hugged identity. Identity was perfectly okay because that didn't necessarily attack corporate interests. And there's an advantage to hugging identity because you can tar the other people as being racist or sexist or bigoted or whatever else. But the moment that Democrats did that, the moment they started taking more cash and everything else, this idea of the voice of labor and the voice of the public was completely decapitated. There was no voice of the public at that point. The public was somewhat voiceless. The avatar of the public's will, in this case, was supposed to be the Democratic Party. When they were bought out, that no longer was true. It's an interesting thing for a politician to stand at the dispatch box, and everyone in that auditorium knows that this guy is a true believer, and he's reading stories saying, here are the real world implications from the policies that you guys have been taking. And I am here as the avatar of that public to make you aware of this. Usually these people are voiceless and faceless and everything else. So it's something to be said when the leader of the opposition, the second strongest party in Britain, is standing up there articulating what these people are saying and experiences that these people are going through in their particular society. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. I loved it when he first did it. People may think it's a political gimmick. It may be a political gimmick. I don't necessarily believe it. I think he's a true believer. But whether it's a political gimmick or not, it's an effective tool. It's an effective weapon. If the Conservative government wants to give tax breaks to their cronies, if they want to cut services and put in this idea of austerity and believe as if the economy is this kind of act of God, fair enough. Well, here are the real world implications for the behaviors and the decisions that you guys have taken while you were in office. I love it. Let's keep going.
Mr. Speaker, evictions by private landlords have quadrupled since 2010. There is not security in the private rented sector, and the Prime Minister well knows it. She also promised one-for-one replacement of council housing sold off through Right to Buy. But just 1 in 5 council homes have been replaced. Hundreds of thousands of people are on housing waiting lists. Will the Prime Minister apologise for what she said and tell the House when she will deliver this one-for-one replacement?
And as the Right Honourable Gentleman knows, we are increasing the flexibilities to enable councils to actually build homes. We've put more money into affordable housing. He talks about the right to buy. I have to say, what a contrast. We actually want to give people the opportunity to buy their own home. The Labour Party would take that opportunity away from them. What do we see? What do we see on housing? You know, the Shadow Housing Minister recently said that fewer people owning their own home is not such a bad thing. Well, I have to say to the Right Honourable Gentleman that what he's offering to people on housing, if you live in a council home, he'll take away your right to buy. If you're looking to rent, Shelter say his policies will harm you. And his Shadow Housing Minister doesn't want to support people owning their own homes. It's only the Conservatives that will deliver the homes this country needs.
If only it were true, Mr. Speaker. Under the Tories, home ownership has fallen by 200,000. Under Labour, it rose by 1 million. And 40% of all homes sold through Right to Buy are now in the private rented sector. The latest figures, Mr. Speaker, show that a quarter of all privately rented homes are not up to decent standards, meaning many families are living in homes with damp that are not secure or very poorly insulated. Does the Prime Minister support homes being fit for human habitation?
Of course we want homes to be fit for human habitation.
That is a surly, that is so surly. Hey, does the Prime Minister believe that people should be able to live in homes that are fit for human habitation? It's like, do you beat your wife? Does the Prime Minister believe people should beat their wives? That's roughed up. I'm fascinated by this conversation. It's so specific. Like, and maybe this is the difference between like federal versus state politics in the United States versus what takes place in Britain. Yeah, we just don't have these type of conversations, and we should. So let's keep going.
But can I just remind the Right Honourable Gentleman that the number of homes failing to meet the decent home standard is down by 49% since the peak under the Labour government. And while I'm talking about the record of the Labour government, statutory homelessness peaked under the Labour government and is down by over 50% since then. It's this government that is delivering for people on housing. It's his government that Labour failed to deliver over 13 years.
I would just remind the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, that under Labour, 1 million homes are brought up to decent home standard. I would also assume from what she said she will be here on the 19th of January to support my honourable friend, the member for Westminster North's bill to make privately rented homes fit for human habitation. When it comes to housing, Mr. Speaker, this government has been an absolute disgrace. After 7 years, more people are living on the streets, more families in temporary accommodation, more families in homes not fit for human habitation, and fewer people owning their own home. When is this government going to get out of the pockets of property speculators and rogue landlords and get on the side of tenants and people without a home of their own this Christmas?
Prime Minister.
Under Labour, house building down, homes bought and sold down, social housing down. I'll tell him one thing did go up under the last Labour government: the number of people on the social housing waiting list. 1.74 million people waiting for a home under a Labour government. We've delivered over 346,000 new affordable homes since 2010. More affordable homes have been delivered in the last 7 years than in the previous 7 years under a Labour government. We're building more homes. Last year we saw 217,000 more homes being built in this country. That's a record. Apart from 1 year, that's a record for the last 30 years. It's the Conservatives that are doing what is necessary. Labour would produce failure for this country once again. It's the Conservatives that are delivering the homes that people need, the economy that people need, and the standard of living that people need.
Little long. She, a little foibled at the end. Foibled at the end. I love PMQ. I love PMQ. The way they get revved up at the end for her to give her, like, she gives her like that final thing of screaming at the opponent. It's like a football match. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love the questioning itself is amazing. It's this thing of look, Labor's weak point, or not Labor's, Conservatives' weak point is always going to be to their left. Jeremy Corbyn is going to hit her in ways that she's going to have, you know, it's kind of difficult to cover. The problem is, I don't know all the stats from the last Labour government. And it is immensely confusing when these guys get up and they say, well, you did this, and the other one gets up and says, no, you're completely wrong, and the actual information is the opposite of what you just said. It's like, God damn it. Ultimately, you can trust that a conservative government will be a conservative government and a Labour government will be to the left. That's about all you can trust. I love this man. Corbyn is uniquely suited to make these type of arguments. And he's trusted when he makes these arguments because I think people understand that this is pretty much where this guy is anyway. So, Prime Minister questions. I think Corbyn started strong. I think he started to slow down towards the end. But ultimately, I love this line of attack. So, I don't necessarily know how this goes over in Britain, but for me, I think it's fucking awesome. And lefties over in the United States love the guy. So, I will leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks guys.